Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar on logical algorithmic thinking. My name is Lynn Haydu. I'm the organizer of this event and the project administrator of the Building CS Capacity in New Jersey project out of TCNJ's Center for Excellence in STEM. This project is a 3-year project funded by the Martinson Family Foundation, whose goal it is to promote computer science education in New Jersey. We have a whole schedule of free professional development opportunities geared towards educators who wish to implement computational thinking in their classroom, brush up on their computer science skills, or expand their programs by increasing course offerings or extracurricular activities. Before I introduce our presenter, I'd just like to run through a few technical details. Everybody should have control over their mute button. If not, we'll kind of get that working. We find that less interference if everyone remains muted through the presentations until we come to a question and answer period. If you would rather, you may also type a question in the chat window or question box below. In the event that anyone is having technical problems, you can use the question box to submit a question privately to me, and I'll take a look at that. I'll be looking out for those sorts of things during the presentation. Finally, if you look under the handout section, you'll find tonight's presentation files, the activity files that Adam has prepared for us, and an informational sheet about our Building CS project with some of our other PD events that we hope you can attend. Okay, on to our presenter. Our presenter this evening is Adam Swift. Adam is a computer science teacher and coding club advisor at Egg Harbor Township High School in southern New Jersey. During his first 8 years of teaching, their computer science program has grown from 3 computer science classes consisting of about 45 students total to 7 computer science classes this year consisting of about 125. With this growth, they've seen an increase in female participation, with females making up roughly 30% of their enrollment. In addition to teaching computer science at the high school level, he also serves as an adjunct professor of computer science at Stockton University. And lastly, along with his colleagues and faculty at Stockton University, he co-founded the CSTA South Jersey chapter, where he is currently serving as the chapter's vice president. Okay, with that, I'm going to hand over control to Adam and let the webinar begin.
Alrighty, thank you very much, Lynn. I just want to thank you as well as TCNJ for the project that you guys have for computer science right now. As a computer science teacher, obviously it's an important endeavor for me. I think it's great that we're starting to get the computer science promotion in the state of New Jersey. I want to welcome everybody from coming. I know all of us are not computer science teachers, but I think that this presentation is applicable in a variety of fields. So just give me a second. I'm going to share my screen with you guys. So can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
All right, so we're good with that. All right. As Lynn said, you guys have a copy of this presentation, but I figured it might just be easier if I'm kind of talking over it and you are viewing my screen. The focus on the presentation is going to be a little bit of how I came about doing logic problems and algorithmic activities, as well as some examples that I use in the classroom with my students that have really, I think, been successful. If at any point you have any comments, concerns, questions, please just chime in and let me know, and we can tackle them as we run into them. So as Lynn said, I've been a computer science teacher at Egg Harbor Township High School going on 9 years now. Our computer science program has grown. I think a large bit of this is due to the fact that we have demonstrated that computer science is more than just coding and lines of code, the stereotypes people think of when they think of computer science. You're in a cube, you're isolated, you're working by yourself. And one of the ways we have done that is through this inclusion of logic puzzles and problems and different activities to kind of get students away from the programming side of computer science and understanding more the process of computer science, that it really is just problem solving. I currently teach 2 levels of computer science, an intro class as well as the AP class, and next year our school will be starting for the first time AP computer science principles. So it's exciting to have a 3-course sequence. Also, as Lynn said, I am an adjunct at Stockton University, where I teach their problem solving and programming class. So that's just a little bit of background on me, but I guess the real reason we are here is this logic problems and algorithmic thinking. So the first question becomes, when did I start using logic problems? During the summer of 2013, I attended a computer science tapestry workshop at the University of Virginia. I know people see tapestry workshop and like, well, what was this all about? Basically, the gist of the workshop was ways to recruit minorities and females into the field of computer science. One of the presenters at this workshop, his name was Robert Luciano, discussed his use of logic problems and logic groups. And many of the activities that I'm going to share with you today actually were stuff that he did, and I've either modified or kind of taken it as is. He was teaching his logic problem, his logic class, as a 90-minute block, which is a lot of time, I feel. I mean, I know I wouldn't necessarily be able to do logic problems for 90-minute blocks, but I have thought, you know what, maybe I could take what he's doing and implement it in bits and pieces within my curriculum. When he was going over the different activities he did, some things that really stuck out to me were what logic problems, what advantages doing logic problems my students could have. Being a computer science teacher, I often have students come in at different ends as far as knowledge. Some of the students have an idea of programming, some have maybe seen it vaguely, and others have never seen computer science. So one of the things I like about logic problems and algorithmic thinking is it's a vital part of computer science, but yet it takes no prior knowledge to answer a logic problem. So all of these problems can be done by anyone. No one's at an advantage because they know programming. Or if you were to implement any of these in a math class or a science class, no one's at an advantage because they know material better than the other student. So it kind of leveled out the playing field and allowed everybody to build some confidence. It also has created more interaction and teamwork, at least in my classroom setting. Once again, I get a lot of the stereotypical students when you think of computer science, the more reserved kids, usually quiet, not as outgoing. But what logic problems and my activities have allowed them to do is kind of become part of a group. I like to say it almost has become, I can't come up with a problem to stump them. It's all about them working together to beat me. Wasn't my intent in the beginning, but that's kind of how it turned out. So I think it definitely has increased the interaction teamwork within the classroom setting. So this is a little background on how I got started with logic problems. At this point, you may be thinking, well, why logic problems for my curriculum? I know all of you may not be computer science teachers. We probably have some regular science teachers, some math teachers. Couple points here. One, procedural thinking is a skill needed by anyone that wants to pursue anything in STEM. It's that process of identifying the problem, planning, coming up with a solution, reevaluating your solution, improving your solution. That's really all a logic problem is, or even these algorithmic activities where the students come up with their plan, implement it, check it, make it better. So it falls right in line with the STEM process, which I know if most districts in the state of New Jersey, this is a big initiative, so it's going to improve that skill without focusing on an exact curriculum item. I also like that logic problems focus on the type of thinking being done. It's all about coming up with a solution. And what I mean by that is it's not so much what do you know from before? What do you remember from last chemistry class that now lets you answer the AP question? What do you know from the previous math chapter that we're now building on 3 chapters later? Although all that stuff is important, I think we often lose students once they struggle with one chapter and we build on it. Then those students kind of just lose all self-esteem and kind of fall behind and say, you know what, I can't do this. Logic problems allow them to have that success in the beginning of class or whenever you implement it, so it's still kind of keeping them built up and confident that they can do things, even if it's a slight deviation from your actual curriculum. Because if the student's not confident, it's not going to matter what you're doing in the classroom. They've also been great icebreakers for me. I love doing these in the beginning of the year. In particular, get to know my students. It gets them interactive. The first couple of weeks of school, they're very much, oh, we're back in school. No one really wants to be there. You got to get them going again. I've also used it for warm-up activities, or bell ringers as some people refer to. I know in my district, they're very big on the students have to come in and get to work, but at the same time, they want you taking attendance and doing all the other checking homework or whatever else you might have to do in that time period. Well, I found logic problems, the more you do them, the more interested the students become in it, the more engaged they are when they come in the room, and they almost start asking you for the logic problems. And these logic problems may or may not pertain to the actual material being presented in class. The way I see it, it just kind of gets their brain going a little bit. And then the last point I have here, which is probably the most important for my students, I think, is it really can, if done in groups, improve soft skills that are so necessary in today's workforce. Whether this is collaboration, communication, confidence. I do a lot of these in groups if there has to be that sense of interaction. Because I tell them there's no job you're going to have where you're not problem solving and you're not communicating with somebody. So I think it really is a fun and entertaining way for the students to work on these skills and not be concerned about, well, I don't know the material as well as my classmates. So we kind of avoid that obstacle. I'm going to break this kind of up into 3 different sections of logic problems / algorithmic thinking. The first is logic problems as icebreakers. These are activities I would do to either kick off the year or get the class period started. I believe they promote teamwork, they promote collaboration, and they help identify leaders, which I think is nice for us as teachers to see, all right, who's the leader of the classroom? Because as we get going, who's the person that feels comfortable answering my questions? When there's that quiet lull in class, who can I call on? So it definitely helps educators identify these students so that we can say, okay, when we hit a bump in the road in a lesson or day's material, who can we lean on to kind of get things back on track or spark conversation? These are pretty basic activities. The first one would be having the students line up by age, including month, day, and year. I'm a high school teacher, so you have a pretty wide range. This becomes a little more challenging for them, but that's all right. That's the whole purpose. They got to work through this. It always sounds very easy when I introduce it to the students, but I also make them aware that there is no talking aloud, nor are they allowed to write anything down. So they just have to come up with, how are we going to get in line by age correctly without talking, without writing anything down? Other than those restrictions, there are no rules. However, they can figure it out. I usually do this on the first day of class or so, because like I said, it's a good way for the students to kind of become more comfortable with each other. And I've seen a variety of techniques for it, from students holding up like a certain amount of fingers to represent the month or the day, and doing different things with determining the year. Being a high school teacher, I've had some of the upperclassmen actually take out their ID that has their birth date on it, obviously their driver's license. And these are all just kind of the creative problem-solving skills that I want the students to try to develop on their own. I want them to come up with thinking outside of the box and coming up with solutions. I also think that this activity is a great activity for kind of showing the impact of nonverbal skills. First, I didn't really think about it, but actually preparing for this presentation got me thinking a little bit. This is a great activity for the students as far as thinking outside the box, coming up with a solution. But it even got me thinking, we can even tie this back to the issue of nonverbal cues and body language, all those things when you're interacting with people. So believe it or not, I actually thought of that while putting this together, and that's going to kind of be something else I add on to when I do this activity, is just using this early on in the year as your body language tells people things, how your gestures, these things matter. So it could be a nice little lesson on that as well. Another activity that I like to share with students or have students do is I will break them up into groups of about 3 to 5. And basically what they have to do is they get a deck of cards. They have to build the biggest structure. It's got to be freestanding. No support. Other than that, no rules. And they just kind of sit down and they work on it. Right? They're not allowed to use any materials. I tell them with a deck of cards, they're not supposed to bend them, not supposed to tear them, anything like that. They just need to build the structure. Once again, not really tied to a curriculum per se. And that's not something we're doing in computer science. Maybe if you're an engineer, you could start to talk about things. But it is a problem-solving thing. How are you're given something, how are you going to work together to come up with an idea? And think about STEM process. What's our plan? How are we going to do this? All right, let's think about it. Let's plan it. Let's create it. Inevitably, their first attempt, it's going to fall down. Their second attempt, all right, well, we can't go back and do the same exact thing that we just did. So what are we going to do to modify it? And I give the students, start out maybe like 10-minute window. Hey, come up with a structure. Let me know. And they'll build, and they'll have some failures. And at different points, we'll measure how high the different structures are and kind of keep the rest of the class updated on. It's competitive in nature. Like I said, it's all about how can we build on what others are doing, how can we make them better. Right? And the last activity, or one of the other activities I use as an icebreaker, is with a deck of cards. I give them an entire deck. They're in groups of 4, and the challenge is to put the cards in order by suit and number in the quickest manner. So however they want to split it up. Maybe one person deals out the cards, and one group member grabs all the hearts, puts them in order. Somebody else grabs all the diamonds, puts them in order. And then the other 2 people do the other suits. However they want to handle this. I tell them they'll have about 5 to 10 minutes to come up with a plan. They get only one timed test. Well, I'll actually time them. And the goal is to be able to put it in order as quick as you can. They may practice multiple times, but when they tell me they're ready, we go ahead and we try their method. We see if it is the fastest. There are no right or wrong answers to solving any of these 3, which I really like about this. There is no you are wrong. There's a better way to improve it. There's a different approach, but no one has an advantage when it comes to how we're going to order a deck of cards quickly. So it is all about just what do we come up with, how do we make it better, improve it. What do we come up with, how do we make it better, improve it. Or thinking outside of the box to make something happen. So I definitely like these activities in kickstarting this mind frame. Like I said, there's no one that comes in my class to study computer science that is at an advantage or disadvantage with these activities. And I think that's very important, that with these activities, everybody has a chance to be successful. So you get lots of buy-in from your students, which I think is definitely a positive thing. Are there any questions? I know I'm kind of throwing a lot. If you have any questions during the presentation and want to interrupt or interject, feel free. If not, I'm going to assume we're good to continue on. In addition to the 3 activities that I mentioned, here are 3 websites that I like to use that have a variety of logic problems. Some of them are visual problems, some of them are lateral thinking problems, and it could be simple word problems, whatever you could possibly think of, riddles you've heard in the past, just this concept of how do we think through a problem. How can we take something and come up with a solution? And like I said, the students almost find this as an entertaining way to kickstart the day. In fact, I know one of my biggest issues is we wind up doing 3 or 4 a day. We run out of them the second month of school, and the rest of the year they're heckling me for more logic problems. So like I said, they do get excited about that. One thing I've done with the icebreaker type logic problems, which would be the 3 I just showed you, as well as these websites, is I've added a little reward system. Maybe I give them a piece of candy if they're the first one to get it right. It's magical how at least high school students will become automatically more engaged if there is that little simple reward for them at the end. But that keeps everybody involved in it. I will say the last link is actually a timed logic test that you can do online, and there are different categories for it. I think the challenge is usually right around May, April-May time period. I've never done the formal challenge with my class. I've had them just take the practice test as activities, even when we're done a unit or it's a day where half the class is out for assembly or whatever it may be, because this logical thinking, this problem solving is a critical component of the learning process, any way you kind of slice it.
Excuse me, Adam.
Yes.
A question has come up about discussing the term lateral thinking.
Okay, so I guess lateral thinking would kind of be when double meaning type things, kind of. So some word plays could be part of lateral thinking. Or different possible solutions that you don't necessarily, it could go one or two ways depending on how you interpret. I'll give you some more examples if this loads. Just a little bigger. All right, so here are just some simple lateral thinking type questions. Right, and I like this website because you can then go ahead and see the answer. So if you look, you can't see me. If you see me, you can't see anything else. I can make you walk if you can't. Sometimes I speak the truth. Sometimes I lie. And I like this website because you can actually click and see what it is. You can get hints to the questions. And the answer would be a dream. So it's kind of going beyond just the straightforward solution where you need to not necessarily take things literally when it comes to lateral thinking. So like, you can't see me, well, you can't see a dream. I can make you walk if you can't. So it's kind of outside of, well, I can make you walk if you can't. Oh, and my doctor or some medication or something that might help with it. Well, sometimes I lie. It's kind of playing on the words that are in there. So you got to kind of think outside of the box for lateral thinking, if that answers the question.
And we also, if you don't mind, taking a couple questions on how you use this actually during a period. How long do you use the challenge? Do you do the challenge and then move on to the lesson? How do you build a lesson around these sorts of activities?
Okay, so I guess there's kind of two questions there. It depends. The website questions on the logic problems, I would usually just get that kind of as like getting started activity, that they come in the room, get them situated, throw it up there, as I have to do all the administrative side of high school education, attendance, and all that good stuff. The question's up there. They're thinking about it. Come up, they get a solution. They maybe take 5 minutes or so, max. Now, from there, I would then transition into, all right, today's lesson is. So I think it's not necessarily, in my case, a period-long thing or a class-long thing for these types of activities. It's more of just a warm-up activity or get the brain going, kind of a brain teaser, get them in the mode, get them calmed down and situated. With the icebreakers, I actually use these activities and a couple others like the entire first week of school. So my block is 55 minutes long. I have all these activities, and it's kind of however long it takes. Because I see these, the ones I'm showing now, as simply getting them into the swing of things. And I'm fine with this taking the entire period because in the first week, 2 weeks, you know, you have, at least on my end, students getting the access to their passwords, students getting on the computer. So whether you want to make like one entire day a logic day in the beginning of the year is always possible. So sometimes you can do that. You can say, all right, maybe you need to take a break at a really difficult unit. Take a break, logic problem day. And I think it's important that there's not always the clear-cut connection to your curriculum as far as like what you're learning at that given time. Like if I'm talking if-else statements and loops and programming, my logic problem for that day might not have anything to do with that, but it's just building on that problem-solving, logical thinking skill that is going to be implemented in scenarios that are catered exactly to the curriculum. I think we got two things there. I see them as a way to get the class started and show them the type of thinking that they need to bring to topics, not necessarily use them as a clear transition into a topic. Any other questions, comments?
It seems to be it for now.
Alrighty. Okay, so that's the logic problem. Like I said, I guess the one challenge is getting them back on to what you're teaching for that specific day after doing the logic problem. But at least we're getting them in and started right away and engaged, because they are going to need this type of thinking no matter what type of class it is. Next thing that I really became a strong believer in dealt with tackling word problems. And I'm sure most of the math teachers will agree with this. Our students don't like word problems. As a computer science teacher, if I provide my students with an outline of what I want their program to do, they can sit down and give me a great program. They'll sit down, they'll create everything they need, they'll type it up, no issues. If I manage to take that outline and put it in paragraph form, the same exact information, students inevitably either leave stuff out of their solutions or are hesitant on how to even begin. So if they read something out of the textbook for a problem, the first question is, how do I get started? When I explain a program, there seems to be no issue. And for me, as an AP Computer Science teacher, the second half of the AP Computer Science exam is 4 open-ended questions where the students have to program by hand. And each question is about 4.5 pages long, with like 1.5 pages of it necessary and the rest just fluff thrown in there. And the complaint I've always had in the past is the difficulty is not in the programming of it, but it's understanding what the heck it's asking. And I got to thinking, well, why is this an issue? Why can't students tackle word problems? And part of this workshop, this was another activity I saw or was presented, dealt with how our minds work. Our minds don't like word problems themselves, and our students don't like to plan before they do anything. So they want to dive right in, but when you don't know how to begin, they don't know how to dive right in. So kind of butting heads on that, and there's a conflict there. So another activity that I like to do in the beginning of the year is this map exercise activity. It really focuses on planning. And the way it works is students will be given 3 to 5 minutes to study their provided sheet of paper. There will be 2 papers you can give your class. And this activity actually is one of the attachments, and the other activities are explained as attachments as well. So you will have access to them. The first paper gives the explanation of the location of different students' homes in paragraph form. The second paper gives the same information, but it's a visual. And here's a screenshot of the 2 different papers. So one half of the room will get the paragraph, the other half of the room will get the diagram. And I'll tell them, listen, you're going to take a short little 10-question quiz on this. I make sure they realize I'm not counting it as a quiz, but it's a challenge to see where our thinking is. While they're studying this, they are not allowed to write anything down, which sounds counterintuitive, but you'll understand in a second why I make that approach. So the paragraph people just read over the paragraph, 3 to 5 minutes. At the same time, the other people get the chart. And what I do after those 5 minutes is then every student takes a quick 10-question quiz, which they complete individually. So a question may be, how many blocks away does Kim live from Lou? Who lives the furthest from the school? Who lives the closest to Marty? And there's about 10 questions, and the students try to answer them. Once they're done, we grade them, and we start to kind of list the total scores on. I have 2 whiteboards, so I list the scores for these students with the paragraph first, and then I list the scores for the map second. Inevitably, the students who had the map, the average on those scores are significantly higher than the paragraph, which then leads to a discussion of, well, why is this? This side isn't just smarter, and this side knows less. There has to be a reason. It's at that point that I let the students show each other the pieces of paper they were holding. So the paragraph side holds theirs up. The map side holds theirs up. Inevitably, there's some rumbling and grumbling about things. And the paragraph side constantly complains about how unfair it was and how they would have done better if they had the diagram. And they're 100% right. But what I really like about this activity is it's a great time to then point out or illustrate to students, this is why you must plan or you must come up with an approach when you read a word problem. You can't just dive in, because they want to complain right away that it was unfair that they didn't get the picture. But yet later on, when I give them a programming problem in the structure of a word problem, they immediately want to say, I don't understand, I don't know how to do this, rather than actually map it out. Kind of jot down a game plan or an outline, if you will. And I constantly refer back to this exercise every time I get that question of, I don't know how to begin. I don't know how to start. My first response is, well, A, did you read the prompt? Of course they did. B, show me what you've planned. Show me what you've jotted down to kind of get started here. And I always get as a computer science teacher, oh, I just started typing and tried to program, but now I'm stuck. And I think this is a great exercise to go back and kind of illustrate that when we're tackling problems and we're working through things, especially anything that involves algorithms or processes, we need to plan and figure out what is the process going to be. How can I map this out so that it starts to make a little more sense? And like I said, this is another activity that I'll do early on in the year because it's a step I want them to take in solving all of their problems. Whether it's multiple choice question, a programming project, whether it's tied directly to my curriculum, whether it's not. If it's a word problem, put it in a form that you can understand or you can work with. And I think this really illustrates to them the importance of that exercise. Like I said, beginning 2 weeks of school, about 10 minutes total. If they don't buy into planning and outlining and thinking about problems when they're presented before jumping right in and making mistakes after this, then I'm not sure they're ever going to buy into it. So I think this does a great job of identifying that for them. And like I said, there's the 2 different sheets, and the questions are attached to the presentation, so you have access to that as well as the solution to them. But you guys, I'm sure, would all be capable of figuring out, but I gave you the key as well. So that's with problem solving. And now the third part of this, we kind of covered logic problems, basic logic problems, brain teasers, that type of thinking, thinking outside the box, visual, lateral, whatever it may be. The issue with word problems, the next thing, and this is very big for me in computer science, is this algorithmic thinking, which the students hear this term and they are immediately terrified of it because they think it's some big confusing word, when all it is a step-by-step process. That's the first thing that I try to do with this initial activity, is to identify an algorithm is not this mystical thing. It's just a process that's got to be done in order. So what this exercise is this is a 1-day exercise. I usually give it as a homework assignment, and then we do the exercise in class. It's a peanut butter and jelly sandwich exercise. The gist of it is students must provide an algorithm or the steps for making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. The only assumption they can have is that all the materials are out and available on the table. So you got the bread there, peanut butter, you have the jelly, knife, fork, whatever you might need, plate, etc. Students are given as a homework assignment to write out the steps for making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Now, as a computer science teacher, I mainly use this exercise to demonstrate computers don't make mistakes. People do. Computers only do what we tell them to do. So you need to be specific about what you tell somebody to do. But the more you think about it, in science, experiments are very regimented. You have to follow the right order procedure, or the experiments could be null and void, or math class, very procedure oriented. So you can't just jump around and do different things. So the students go home, they complete the instructions. The next day they come in, and I never tell them this part. I actually bring in the ingredients to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches based off of the instructions that each student wrote down. So we're going to take the algorithms they developed and read through them and see if we can make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And the student reads off their instructions, or I usually have them exchange it with somebody sitting next to them so they don't try to change it halfway through the exercise. And then I have a student go up there, and they're the sandwich maker. And we go through this process of read your instructions, let's see what your sandwich does. And inevitably, the students get a kick out of it because the sandwiches are a complete disaster, from never telling people to open up the peanut butter container or scoop any peanut butter out of the container. Some people say just put the peanut butter on the bread. So in the past, I've had students actually pick up the peanut butter container and just lay the entire container on top of a loaf of bread. Sometimes students, like I said, don't tell them to open it, or they say pick up the peanut butter using a knife, scoop out peanut butter, put it on the bread, pick up the jelly using a knife, scoop, but they haven't told them to put down the peanut butter or the other knife. So it kind of gets a snowball effect, and the kids enjoy the period, but it also serves the purpose of we need to be precise in the things we're doing. Algorithms can be very, very simple, or algorithms are simple in the sense of what an algorithm is, the step-by-step process, but it's not always as easy to accurately write algorithms or follow them because we make a whole lot of assumptions. And those assumptions can lead to huge issues in our research, in our program, in our formulas, whatever it may be down the line. So I think it's a good way to demystify what an algorithm is Because no, especially when I get freshmen, they think it's the end of the world or they're learning this big fancy thing. So, oh, wait, I know what an algorithm is. But then they also see, although it seems simple in theory of what it is, it's maybe not so easy to actually write or develop algorithms. And to be able to walk through a process, whether it's computer science, a scientific process, a mathematical process, with that focus to detail is challenging at times. I think this is a great activity. Like I said, this would probably take an entire class period. Hey, another algorithmic activity I like to do in my class deals with a deck of cards again. Lots of stuff with cards. It's called a 10-card dealing logic. Basically, a group, 3 to 4 students, each one gets one suit and cards from ace to 10. And what the group has to do is they shuffle them up. They must stack the cards so that when they are dealt, they come out in ace to 10 order. So immediately they stick them in their stack and like, all right, I'm done, before they even let me finish the instructions. The deal is the cards can be dealt the following way. So they put the cards in what they think is the correct order. The first card on the top will be flipped over and dealt face up. That should be the ace. The second card will be placed under the deck. The next card will be flipped up and placed. That should be the 2. The next card under, flip, and replace. What I am actually going to try to do, because I think that might have been a little confusing, so I'm going to see if I can switch to kind of, what can I do? Can I go to my webcam here to demonstrate this? So I think everybody can see me. So here would be the deck of cards. The first card should be flipped. This should be the ace. They're then going to take the next card, place it under the deck. The next card they flip should be the 2. They're going to place the next one under, flip again. That should be the 3. The next card under, flip again, the 4, under, flip, the 5, under, flip the 6, under, 7, under, flip would be the 8, under, flip it'd be the 9, and the last one should be the 10. So that's how that exercise would work. And the point of this is that students would have to come up with an algorithm on how to get those cards in order. And at first it seems really simple because they just think, well, all I have to do is put every other card that I want to flip, but they don't realize halfway through the deck, you need to break it up by every other card again. And then halfway through that, you have to break it up by every other card. So they need to come up with the algorithm of how to put those cards in order so that when dealt, it turns out that way. So that's always a fun, challenging activity that can take anywhere from 15 minutes to 40 minutes, depending on the group. One thing I've done to build on this activity, if a group gets done earlier or before the other, is you can always add in the face cards. Or I've actually had students try to do this activity with multiple suits. So I was just using, I think it was the spades, ace to 10. I say, okay, now do spades and hearts all together so that you flip up all the spades, ace to 10, then all the hearts, ace to 10. So you can modify this activity to allow all groups to finish at least the basic part of it, but also have the other groups still working. Any questions on that activity? Because I think that's probably the most confusing one, but hopefully the demonstration helped. All right, and I guess the third algorithmic activity, and this is one that typically takes an entire period for my students. And I've actually used this at the university I teach at, and those students actually love it. I've had some say, you know what, this should be our final. It drives them so crazy. And it's a common exercise that you've seen or a variation of it, I'm sure. So Mr. Smith, Mr. Jones, and Mr. Wilson are all on the side of the river with their bags of gold representing those money values. They are trying to all get to the other side of the river with their gold. There's only one rowboat. This rowboat has two seats, so either two people can fit on it or one person and one bag of gold. The rules are they don't trust each other, so no one wants to, they're not in this together. So if they can leave with more money, then they don't care about the others, nor do they really care about crossing the river. They can't be watching more gold than they start with. So Smith has $8,000 of gold. He at no point can be watching by himself any more than $8,000. Jones 5, Wilson 3. The assignment here is the students had to come up with the algorithm to get the people and their gold across the river. And it involves taking the boat over, coming back, taking gold over, pulling their gold, coming back. And there's an algorithm process that they need to come up with that eventually gets everybody over without breaking any of the rules. And this exercise builds perfectly on the map one because the first thing students try to do is they try to do this in their head. And then I ask them to explain it, and they get the names all mixed up and the money's amount all mixed up. This kind of builds on the map exercise one we were talking about earlier about planning and writing our thoughts down, but yet is working on their creating algorithm skills, creating processes, following those processes. Just some possible errors, just to give you an idea if you're a little confused by this. Let's say Smith takes the boat over with his bag of gold, drops it off, and comes back. He can leave his gold on the side. If Jones goes over with his money, the problem's going to be when he gets to the other side, Jones now has his bag and Smith's bag. He would run away, not worry about the others, take the extra money. Let's say we have Jones and Wilson cross the river. Jones dropped.
Uh-oh, did I lose you?
Adam, are you still there? Adam? I think we're having some technical problems. Let's see if we can get Adam back online.
I think I'm back. Can everybody hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
All right, good. So as I was saying, here are just some examples of the rules about this. And the students just had to come up with the algorithm. Like I said, it's just that process of developing algorithms, coming up with a process, and developing that skill outside of topic-centered questions. This is not a science question. This is not a math question besides being able to know that 8,000 is more than 5,000. This is just problem-solving, algorithmic, logical thinking that everybody can be successful at, but it's also the type of thinking that is implemented in all the STEM fields. So we're enhancing that skills, but not alienating anybody as far as those with less familiarity with a concept or a specific topic. So that's what I really like about these three activities. Just two more slides.
Sorry, Ed. A couple people have asked with these activities, do you ultimately give them the correct answers? Do you have them struggle with it until they come up with an answer? What do you do in terms of the, if they don't get there or that sort of thing?
Okay, so that's actually my very next slide. So as far as implementing it, what I've found with high schools, well, first, what I found for myself, if I carry the solutions of problems around the class with me, our natural instinct as teachers slash facilitators is to guide them onto the right path. Like, that's what teachers do. But I think with these, it's important that the students really struggle through them. Because since this isn't tied to my curriculum per se, like it's not a computer science concept and it's not a math concept, we're trying to strengthen their logical thinking, problem solving, algorithmic skills. So we have to be very careful in providing them too much assistance. So what I like to do is I don't carry the solutions around, nor do I have them memorized. Because when I do, I just throw out too much guidance. So what I like to do with my students is at the high school level, they have to figure it out. Now, if it's the crossing the river one, they don't necessarily lose points if they don't figure out the right answer, because I think the process is probably of more value than that they actually get 3 people across the river. If I can have a group of 4 or 5 students struggle through this for an entire class period, but work on it and work together and collaborate and try and improve and try and change and modify, that is serving as much good as it did the group who got it the first go around. So for some of these activities, I won't give them the answers. Now with crossing the river, I won't let them do it for 5 straight days. Like at some point you got to stop, so maybe 1 class period. But then usually I try to incentivize it somehow, maybe say, you know what, if you finish for homework, you get extra credit. And a couple days down the line, I might share the answer. But I think what you'll find with a lot of these are they are engaging enough and intriguing enough and far enough off of the branch of being an assignment, like the students don't really see it as an assignment, that they will work on it outside of the classroom. So I guess when you give them the answer, the solution is really dependent on your approach, but I would cautious being too quick to give them the answers, because that struggle can be part of it. Now, if a kid's completely defeated, then obviously you got to know when, all right, this is no longer serving value. Like I said, I don't like to carry the solutions around because I give too much assistance when they struggle, because as teachers, that's what we want to do. We want to help. But when we think of teaching, that's for teaching concepts. Problem solving, logical thinking, algorithms, that's the students kind of need to do it to get better at it, not necessarily be guided through it. And then when it is time to share, sometimes I might put a student that solved it in the group, and they got to kind of give clues to the student, so I remove myself from the equation. And I think that's a valuable experience for that student who now has to assist without giving the solution. But that's what I would say as far as providing solutions. As far as my experience, like I said, the implementation of these logic problems slash algorithmic thinking activities has made class a little more fun for my students, I think. I think they really look forward to coming in. Granted, after the logic problem, I feel like some of them may think the class is really, really boring. Hopefully not. But at least 4 or 5 minutes, I know I got them thinking. I know they have them working, and they don't even see it as work. They just think, hey, this is today's challenge. This is fun. It's been very effective in getting students in and ready to go and engage in activities. Like I would have never thought throwing a riddle on the board or activity with a deck of cards could silence an entire classroom of high school students, but it seems to have worked. I've seen a variety of students be successful. To be honest, it's sometimes my smartest students or the students with the highest grades that struggle the most with this thinking, because for whatever reason, maybe their skill really has been just being able to read and process material and remember it and apply it, but they haven't really been asked to kind of use the other problem solving, logical thinking or side of their brain. So this is activity they may struggle with, so it's good to strengthen that skill for them. And obviously it's also good for the student who may not be the highest GPA student to see success against their classroom counterparts, if you want to look at it that way. And I know for me, especially in an elective course, it's been a huge recruitment tool, right? I stress to my students, you guys may not move on in computer science, and that's okay, but as foundation, it's really just problem solving. And part of the reason I do these activities throughout the year is even if you're not going to be a computer science person, this is a skill you're going to need. So no matter what you choose, problem solving, logical thinking, collaboration are all skills they're going to need. And the way it's kind of turned out is it's kind of become like what my class has kind of been known for. Like I've had kids say, oh, you do the logic problems. And I have students say, hey, have you ever seen this logic problem? It's just neat to see, though it's not my topic, to see students engaged in a thinking process, because that might be more valuable than learning a for loop in computer science. If I'm getting kids to buy into solving problems, then no matter what they do with their lives, that's a skill they're going to have. So I know that was a ton of information, and I can be a little long-winded. Any questions or comments? Like I said, you do have access to all of the handouts, which I included. The solutions are there, because I know I like to have the solutions. Besides the map exercise, I don't think I have the solution. Or not the map, the crossing the river exercise. I don't think I included the solution on, but I also find it entertaining to actually do that one with my students. Make it a challenge to compete against them, and they definitely buy into that. But I do want to thank everybody for hearing what I have to say. Hopefully you found this insightful or valuable, whether you take one exercise from this or check out those websites. I think it's definitely something your students will enjoy, and just making them better thinkers and problem solvers is key for all the students we're educating.
Okay, one more question has come up. Is it hard to switch from these problems back to Java code?
At times it definitely is. But if you set the routine that's kind of like the carrot you're dangling in front of them, listen. If it's a real, I may throw out a logic problem to them. All right, we got to get back on task. If we knock this out of the park and you guys are engaged throughout class, we'll do another one at the end. So it can be, you do have that transition issue sometimes. I typically do this more in my intro class than my AP class. But you do have that struggle of, all right, now it's on to the day's task. But I guess you got to pick your battles on some level.
Okay, one last chance. Any last questions? You can feel free to unmute yourself and speak if you have any last questions. Somebody has asked, what about the middle school learner?
I think all of these could be used with middle school students. I really do. I mean, some of them might be more challenging for middle school students, but since they don't involve any prior knowledge of any topic, I don't see why not. I mean, I do this with freshmen the first week of school for all intents and purposes. That's an 8th grader. I mean, you would probably have to give a little more instruction or guidance, or for like the card activity, maybe you back it down to, I don't know, a few less cards. But I do think that logic problems for middle schoolers may even be the best time to introduce them, to get that brain, that thinking that way ahead of time. I think you'd be surprised at what they're able to come up with when they separate it from learning in the sense of, oh, I can't learn calculus, I'm only in 7th grade. You give a kid a deck of cards and be like, you need to flip these over and it needs to show up in this order. That's just kids playing with a deck of cards. They'll buy into that, and I think probably surprise us on how they perform.
One more question. What are your middle school students doing in your district regarding computer science?
All right, my middle school students, our district's actually been very supportive of computer science. We don't have computer science classes in the middle school. We have, what do they call them? Technology. We have technology teachers that the subject matter teachers bring their class in, and the technology teacher is supposed to work with them. Our middle school has actually done a lot of stuff with Scratch. It's been a big thing in our middle school. Lots of programming in Scratch, creating projects for, like, say, a science class, with the technology teacher leading the way as far as Scratch goes, and the science teacher in there for the science side of it. I know we've also had computer clubs set up at both levels. They've used the Spheros in their computer clubs. I know a couple years ago we had the high school students do a tour around the district schools where my high school students worked with elementary students on programming Finch robots. So then a bunch of teachers went out and brought Finch robots.
Hmm.
Lots of neat stuff going on in our middle school, so I'm pretty lucky.
Okay. Last chance. Any final questions for Adam? Okay, if there are no further questions, I'd just like to say thank you very much for attending. As Adam pointed out, the presentation and activity files are all located in the handouts for you to download. We did record this webinar, and the link to that recording is going to be sent to all of you, along with a link to a brief survey about this event. If you could take the time to complete the survey, we would greatly appreciate it. We'd love to hear your feedback so we can improve upon and make other great PD events for you. And as soon as I receive a response, I'll send out PD certificates for anyone who's interested. Thank you again, and I hope to see you at some of our future events. Good night.
Thank you.